the future of security and why it's application-centric. If we think about applications in the modern enterprise, they might be the back-end systems, the front-end systems, the productivity environments, but the nature of the enterprise today is reliant and dependent on applications. So it is actually very critical to change the view of how you think of security, not just from a perimeter and endpoint perspective, but what are your critical technologies that drive and run your business doing, and how do you protect them? Any enterprise typically runs between 500 to 7,000 applications, and this is data we sourced from a Netscope report. And what tends to happen is that the threats to these applications come from many forms. Insider, these can be as simple mistakes to targeted insider threats. We all hear about external nation state type issues. Certainly in the United States, we talk about this from many forms, whether it's elections to key PII information. Recently, we've seen a lot of conversations around the data protection by pharmaceuticals around the COVID vaccination and so forth. So they can present threats in many ways to the technologies that run your business, and certainly blind spots in the issues that we uncover from different avenues, whether it's governmental sources or any CI information in terms of applications. On an average, enterprises spend anywhere north of $4,000 per employee to protect that in the financial services industry. And you can look at the amount of investment that is taken. So it is a real problem. It is a real challenge. And why the application-centric approach? The traditional tools that we've been deploying for many years are designed to understand the nature of a dynamic application environment, right? We may use infrastructure type controls. We may use IaaS, DAS, MAST, all the different static controls to understand the code. But what's happening in the runtime environment and where the risks are sitting, whether it's access, breach, lateral movement, and so forth, requires a different layer. And why the application-centric approach is because the lens that we use from an infrastructure view, the aperture is too wide, doesn't allow you to narrow down to the specific issues and controls that you want to have from an application perspective. And then if it's just a static layer on the app side, it doesn't give you a view of the dynamic issues. Or more recently, what we found is that many organizations globally are looking to adopt moving to the cloud. When you hear those transformations, typically the enterprise doesn't say we're moving our infrastructure. They're looking to move their applications. Whether it's a lift or shift to the infrastructure or a transformation, understanding the apps, their roles, how they connect, what they present in terms of execution is all important to understand and protect the applications from a risk perspective. When we're looking to secure the important things and you take an infrastructure-centric approach, your network and your servers and your perimeter look really well secure. Then when you look a little deeper, you find that the application environment is free range, right? And I'm sure this is not atypical of the large enterprise. And so the challenge then becomes, how do you understand all what's going on, the dynamism, the application development teams and the software teams are always focused on delivering the business perspective and the business value. It's constantly moving. So the question then becomes, how do you secure it? And if you don't have an application-centric view, then you'll continue to look like the fort, but have a free range internal environment. And this starts to become very challenging as you start to adopt environments like the cloud, or you start to move into a SaaS environment where typical business process outsourcing or technology outsourcing to a SaaS model is being adopted. And these start to end up bringing tremendous amount of issues and starts to bring the risk into your enterprise versus you trying to manage it cohesively. The problems with the legacy approaches is that from an infrastructure-centric view, like I've suggested, is the lens is wrong, right? You don't see the execution, or you don't see the risk, you don't see the business aspect of the applications. You see it as a configuration issue. You see it as a configuration control. You see it as a patching or a network-based issue. When you look at it from a purely AppSec side of view, from a static review perspective, again, that's a challenge. It protects the code, not the environment, not the session, not the execution of the software, and it certainly doesn't protect the issues that are in between the execution of the software. So many times what we've seen is that you do a vulnerability scan, everything looks okay, until the red team comes out and tells you, well, two components of the application are chatting over unencrypted channels in the session in the runtime environment, and that seems to be a big gaping hole. So pure scanning based methods or infrastructure based methods is certainly a challenge. The other issue is it's an operational burden. We all know in large enterprises the number of applications and the change, and manually managing that, whether it's agents and policy and the false positives and maintenance and so forth, is a massive task, and it cannot just be handled from a security operations or an infrastructure operations perspective, right? We have to change the dimension of that. We have to change how we approach and isolate the issues that we're trying to manage. And the time to value operationally is difficult. And then lastly, static analysis based, whether it's snapshotting, configurations, and signatures, we all know how that of the past is now leading to more issues rather than less. And we're in a constant game of catch up, right? Apply the next set of signatures, apply the next set of patching or enhancements, or look at the next set of vulnerabilities, and then constantly just crawl up. And so something has to change. Something has to be done to fix this problem. And the solution is taking an application-centric approach. What this requires is now changing how security is evolving from the static side to the dynamic side of things, getting analytics and feeds, getting the understanding of how things interact, understanding how applications are scheduled, what are the time windows, what are the operational time windows. We all know the famous Swift attacks in the financial, right? They come in the weekends, they take the money and they go away. Or other types of issues when the guard is down because you're not expecting behaviors and you don't understand when interactions are in place. The other thing is that when we look at endpoint APM technology alerts and logs, you need a method to pull all that telemetry and sift through all the noise to get to the signals. Unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of other issues when it comes from that perspective, is that you've got to tie in the various types of security toolings that you're bringing in from the various purchases that you might have done, whether it's in identity space or in the asset management space or in the code space, to those telemetry points that are in real time. So what needs to happen is the ability to join all that information so that then you can have an effective way per app to secure and understand how things operate. All of this in a runtime environment. So the challenge is becoming more and more difficult, and broad. The new approach means that you've got to deal with the volume of data, the volume of applications, the volume of the change. Understand what the change is. You've got to make sure you bring in all the connectivity issues. And this is not just network-centric, it's identity-centric, it's process-centric, it's execution-centric. And then take all this complexity and bring it together in various different forms with context in mind. And so these issues that make application protection difficult are things that when you sit back and you look at the environment and you take a, say, infra-centric role or a perimeter-centric role, you start to, lose that context and that capability, and then you find ourselves in the newspaper with issues. For all of these reasons, the application-centric security is the future. And how do you define that? So the first thing is that you've got to do two things. The primary thing is start to create an identity or a fingerprint of each of the applications in your environment. Now, you can do this from a shift left perspective when you have the ability to go greenfield. But if you're in a brownfield, is find a method to collect the information that you need to baseline and profile what that application space looks like. And the second piece that needs to be done is layer that with the security context. This is either in the runtime or a policy. What are you trying to achieve from a security perspective? Apply that over the application identity that you've created or understand, and then see where the gaps are. What's not enough is doing this from a static policy perspective. You've got to make sure that the intended behavior of your controls and security context is actually what's manifesting in your fingerprint or identity of your application. So these are two very important aspects that need to be brought together in order to have an effective policy. The other thing is that human intelligence and human muscle alone can't solve this problem. You've got to start to bring machine intelligence. We've all heard the concepts where many organizations are talking machine language or machine learning, AI, and the various other things. And the reason for these concepts is that because of the vast amount of data and the number of applications in the enterprise, it's not humanly possible, and you can certainly cannot hire teams large enough to solve these issues. So you start to need technology that is ahead of the curve, that helps you start to build not only the understanding, but start to also do this in real time, because behavioral change as it's happening, catching that is more important than doing that retroactively through log sifting. So continuous assessment through this using machine intelligence technology is now a requirement, and it's no longer something that you can look to as a future opportunity. Bringing those pieces together with the security identity concept, you start to then create this composite view where you can start to build a zero trust perimeter across all your apps, app by app. And that's the key thing. How do you deliver that security posture? What are the various components of it, whether it's runtime execution to infrastructure components or identity components, but bringing all of that together to start building that zero trust perimeter approach for each application, not a subsection of the environment. Very early representations of the zero trust approach were network centric, but we all found out that there's a lot of data. You're looking at a lot of things. You can't get to answers, so you've got to put them in absorbable bite sizes. And having an application-centric way of doing that is a more effective method to creating that posture. And so how does this then work in terms of empowering the different teams, and where there's the value perspective, right? Whether it's identity governance and the execution and understanding how that relates to all of those pieces, whether it's the shift left aspect of the applications, DevOps teams understanding as they release or when they see issues, or from a security management perspective of the CISO, applying the posture and guidance across the organization and driving policy to the core security teams and the threat response teams. You need to thread the needle across all these aspects through a single fabric to achieve that zero trust baseline for application. And unfortunately, the challenge is that you can't boil the ocean, and that's why an application-centric view, piece by piece, value by value, is the most effective method. At the end of the day, the future of security is application-centric, and the reasons being is the applications are critical. In most cases, if you look at the tech companies, that is our business, right? You see a lot of new technologies, such as new innovations. Let's take a simple one like Uber. Gone are the days where you picked up the phone to call the taxi operator to get a dispatch to find you. You now use technology, and that's to Uber. That technology is their business, right? And when you look at the financial services, the way it's all transforming in terms of how you pay, how you buy things, and especially in this COVID era, I mean, I personally haven't used cash in the last 6 months. And so it's all technology delivered. And so securing them too is and properly is very important. The next piece is the application-centric approach greatly reduces the risk because you can understand it app by app rather than at an infrastructure layer or a software layer or a code layer. You've got to look at it from an app-based view that helps you then understand how you can increase the efficiency of your risk posture and then apply the controls and eventually get the benefit of a zero trust for the application environment as you scale up.